Hello and welcome to Deep in Pact, proud member of the Doof Network, where we dive deep into Wildbow's most forgotten work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
Thanks, Elliot. And we're back to talk about Signature 8.6, our nameless protagonist's point of view arc. And she continues on her rampage, I suppose, dragging this poor innocent goblin. Well, he's not really poor or innocent, and it's not really a rampage. Look, we're off on the wrong foot here, I think. Let's start again. Our nameless point of view character continues to drag Buttsack behind herself deep into Johannes's domain, kind of noticing how weird everything is. Especially how, the thing I like the most about this is how the place seems to operate to funnel things in towards the center in a very kind of unsettling way.
Yeah, the whole place feels claustrophobic and kind of on edge. It's like you don't necessarily need to be panicking if you're our point of view character, because she's got protection.
Yeah.
But I don't feel
now,
like you could ever...
right?
Well, yeah. But I don't feel like anyone could ever relax here. Like, this is not a place where you could ever just be like, oh, okay, I can chill. Like, there's always... Even if you're safe, it's just... There's something wrong about this place.
But it's an amusement park. the least relaxing amusement park that I've ever seen. No, you're right. I almost typed that it was scary in my notes, but it's not scary in that sense. It just leaves you really uneasy, right?
Yeah.
I guess this is a question for you. I'm not sure if I remembered my first time through. I can't remember if I thought that these were actual people, if we kind of already knew that they were vestiges.
Yeah, so I remembered the whole thing about Johannes' domain being like a vestige and stuff from Miss Lewis's talk, but I wasn't sure if that's where Maggie was. Like, I think you could probably go back and look at my live read. I think there was one where one tweet where I was like, these are the vestiges, right, that are being like tormented, I hope. And then later on I kind of felt bad for thinking that, but we'll get there. But yeah, yes. I was very much unsure. I didn't know yet whether what we were seeing was the vestige version or not.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fair. But still, it does feel very uneasy, right? It's very... I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff that just is off the whole time, right? It just doesn't feel good to be there.
Yeah.
So ex-Maggie kind of wanders past a bunch of people and others and kind of remarks on them as she, makes her way through the domain. One that I think is a pretty big example of how off things are is that there are people in air quotes, and others kind of talking and chit-chatting, which is really weird.
Yeah, I mean, a whole segment of this chapter is really dedicated to just a walkthrough of Johannes' domain and how not chill it is. And yeah, everything from like, the sun to the people and the not people is just off.
Yeah, it's weird. And it's an interesting start to the chapter as well, right? Because it is... The first maybe third of this chapter, I want to say, is kind of dedicated to ex-Maggie walking more or less by herself, dragging at this point, unconscious Buttsack, and just kind of watching things. And it gives it this weird kind of quiet feeling to the start of the chapter, where she is kind of just like like outside at the zoo, kind of looking at these weird little situations and seeing how strange everything is. It's a weird feeling to the start of the chapter.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of puts you on edge for the inevitable meeting with Johannes. Like, that's coming eventually, and so it's just sort of setting up how on edge you should be about that, because, this is his domain and the place is sketchy as fuck. So ex-Maggie kind of continues to struggle her way through the North End and eventually finds her way to a school. Yes, our ex-Maggie, not much of a student, ex-Holt, manages to find herself in a school yet again. I think we've honestly spent more time with her in schools than anywhere else.
Yeah. Which is interesting. There is such a strong association between Maggie and schools, right? Because obviously she's like she is a schoolgirl in the kind of strictest sense of the word. But I kind of feel weird about it because it feels like there's a little bit of like us as the spirits kind of associating this core thing to her identity, and then it kind of feeding back into the story a bit.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because she doesn't seem to enjoy school, but she always ends up there, even when she doesn't have to right now.
Yeah, totally. One other thing that I want to call out during the first part of this chapter is we start to see more and more of ex-Maggie kind of having to struggle to make her way through the domain here, right? Like a little bit of her feeling weak and kind of feeling the drain of Johannes's domain more. I don't know. It worries me because it does feel like she's kind of fading out.
Yeah, and you know, there's some more concrete examples of what might be filling in the gaps later. But obviously, I mean, almost by design, this is a terrible place for humans to be.
Yeah.
Or you know, humans, vestiges, whatever you think the difference there might be.
All right.
But what I wanted to really talk about here is like this is sort of the end of the segment of the chapter that we talked about, which is just introducing us to Johannes' domain.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to talk about, obviously, we know the domain is directly influenced by the practitioner, and they're familiar, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even with a large domain like this, that probably still holds. So I feel like there's a lot that this domain can tell us about Johannes and his familiar. I mean, I'm getting the impression that his familiar might be the main deal here. I feel like Johannes is the current sort of partner, but the familiar is probably someone who, you know, has the plans and is, you know, just using Johannes for his, you know, mortal status.
Interesting.
But anyway, I mean, going back to the domain and what I think it's saying, like obviously Johannes isn't just using this as his home, like he's using it as an other Westworld place. And so that means like it's not just like his home. Like I don't think I don't want to read too much into every little detail because it's sort of he's setting it up for his customers as much as he is for himself. But I also think that could cross both ways, right? Like if he's in like setting this domain up in a specific way and that attracts certain spirits, those spirits probably feed into him and his spirits as well, I would imagine. Anyway, I think like the whole domain is very sort of on edge and claustrophobic, and it's out of time is another beat we hit a few things. And I feel like I feel like I'm just getting the impression that Johannes is this person who's sort of driven by a lust for power, and he doesn't maybe even have a goal in mind beyond power. Like I feel like he could be one of those people who just wants power for power's sake.
Interesting.
I don't know. Like I got the sense from the domain that it's almost like that's his current limit, and he feels trapped there, and it's all just on edge because he's just waiting to make this play for the Lord of Jacob's Spell that he's clearly going to make. So I don't know. That's sort of the connection I'm trying to draw here. Is I feel like he's someone who is just gunning for more power and is sort of tensely waiting in what he sees as his current limit to expand.
Interesting. It's interesting the idea of him kind of feeling limited by this domain because it is
fucking huge.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most powerful like thing that we've seen from a mortal so far, right? Like I think that's a fair point to say.
No, of course, but you know the thing about humans is you can become comfortable with your status quo very quickly and want to have more. I mean that's something history has taught us pretty conclusively. So like I'd be more than willing to believe, especially if he's being fed this by his dog familiar that, you know, I do think maybe is pulling the strings a lot. They might be in this situation where this is just, you know, a face. Because there's no way Johannes got this domain without help from his familiar. I mean, we've all kind of assumed that's the case, right? Like the familiar must have helped him do this because it's ridiculous that he got this domain. So
sure.
I definitely feel like it's just, you know, this is stage one of whatever the overall plan that they have might be.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, I'm not going to comment on that too much because there was a fair amount in there that was quite predictive, but let's just leave it and see how we go, I suppose. So ex-Maggie at this point takes Buttsack inside a school And again, Buttsack clearly doesn't have a good experience of being in schools with Maggie, because she kind of wakes him up and he starts freaking out when he realizes that he's in Johannes' domain. And ex-Maggie basically says, hey, swear allegiance to me for a year or I'm just going to throw you outside and you can deal with all the horrible things that are out there.
I love how, like, skipping back a little bit, I love how he's just a complete mess from being dragged along the road. Like, you know, I think it's like the description is like his muscles and like some bones were showing, like he's been torn up.
Yeah.
And you know, she's not even done with him. Like, she shoots him in the crotch with her lead pipe gun thing. So yeah. Like,
it's rough.
Like, it's good that he's a goblin that I don't really give too much of a shit about, because it's pretty horrific. Like, even though he's a goblin, I was still like, oh, like, geez. And yeah, then obviously, she makes him swear allegiance to her, and there's this real sense of, because he just sort of does it, like he gives in very quickly, and you're kind of like, oh, you're like, yay, but like that was too easy. Like, he's really fucking frightened of this place. That, like, alarm bells.
Yeah, and even ex-Maggie is surprised at how quickly he agrees, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of, until that, I thought this was the reason that she brought him here, because bringing him here gives her such bargaining power over him. But she didn't seem to realize just how powerful that would be. So that kind of makes that a bit more of a question mark for me. But regardless, it worked out pretty well. She's got a subservient goblin again, so that's good, maybe?
I mean, it seems to be so far, but as she says, he's presumably doing everything he can to think of a way out of this. But yeah, I mean, I think a huge part of why she brought him was it was very theatrical. Like, you know, not just killing the leader of the goblins, but imprisoning him and taking him with her, I think may have just been part of the whole show. And yeah, I think there may have been part of her plan was to, like, oh, maybe I can get something out of him. Like, she was probably expecting him to haggle. Maybe this is how she starts her goblin negotiations. It's like, you know, obey me for a year, and eventually they end up with, like, he gives her a piece of information about Johannes or an ear.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Buttsack agrees to be subservient to her, and as part of this kind of, she makes him bend to follow some, like, laws of etiquette, which make nice Buttsack my favorite character. He's so, like, reluctantly kind.
It's the
best.
It's comedy gold.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, him. I mean, I would have pulled out specific quotes so we could read them, but I would have just had to pull every single one because they're all, like, fucking hilarious. It's a brilliant idea to take this character you spent the entire arc building up as just an insufferable asshole, and then have him be, like, magically bound to have to try and be nice, and watch him try and figure out how he can do it in the worst possible way. Like, he's constantly trying to be maliciously compliant, and it's great.
Yes, it's awesome. Scarf Girl kind of is dominating Buttsack, and this young girl kind of is watching them. Ex-Maggie turns around and notices this young girl watching them, and she then runs off, and they kind of follow her to find this kind of small enclave of hiding children, vestige children.
Well, and even then, not so much children anymore. Mostly
they're vestige children. They're also part mouse. So let's talk about these Mouseketeers, as we'll call them.
I love that name.
And we'll kind of bounce back to the Westworld comparison as well, because I think the theme of what I want to talk about here is ex-Maggie seems pretty horrified by this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of thinking about it, I was totally kind of falling into the Westworld morality question, and I think we kind of argued this out for a while on our Westworld episode of Media MD as well. But I'm bringing it back up again here because I'm kind of on the side of, I guess, Johannes / the Westworld corporations, because, like, well, okay. Here's the question to me is, how much do these vestiges actually have sentience / possess the capability for emotion versus just being designed to kind of exhibit symptoms of that so that the others that want to torment these things can kind of be satisfied? Because I kind of feel like they are less sentient and more kind of echo than sentient creature, you know? Which makes me feel like, I don't know, it's not that big a deal.
Well, I guess I have two follow-up questions to that, which is, first of all, do you think Rose is different to the vestiges here then?
So this is a question, because I was thinking about this as well, right? I was thinking like, okay, well, let me imagine Rose in this position. Rose is obviously sentient. Like, we've been with her long enough to know that she is an independent creature. I don't know. I mean, I feel like she's more sentient, but then again, we've just spent, eight arcs of this story with her, so maybe I'm just kind of being a bit biased there. Maybe she isn't a special case, and this is actually horrible. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So to bring it back to the Westworld comparison, I guess, if it was real people, this was happening to, and their memories were getting wiped at the end of every night, would you have more of a problem with that than what happens to the Westworld robots?
Well, yes, because the real people, the difference is that in that moment they're experiencing like pain and trauma, right? Whereas I don't think the robots in Westworld, putting aside the whole sentience revolution stuff that we'll talk about when we talk more about Westworld back on BDMD, but when these are just robots that are exhibiting symptoms of sentience, but not actually having sentience, then I'm totally fine with it. Like, I don't think they're actually, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we are just rehashing this argument, because again, like my thinking is just what's the difference? Like, what makes a human experiencing these emotions more pure than a machine or a vestige?
Because I don't think they're essentially actually feeling experiencing the emotions. I think they're displaying signs that they're experiencing the emotions, but inside their brain, it's just, oh, okay, 10001100. All right, fine.
Well, I mean, you can break down human neural pathways into ones and zeros. Like,
well, okay, but let me just say this, Elliot. The one last point I have to make about this is these violent delights do have violent ends. So that is a good point.
Oh, good point.
No, you're right, and we can probably argue this forever. I mean, like,
yeah,
to an outside observer, there's no difference between a fucking Westworld robot and an actual human. So maybe it is just a moot point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I definitely agree that there is this sort of instinctive. And I felt this, like, again, you can see it in my live read, there's this bit where I'm like, oh, they're just vestiges, it's okay. Like, there's this bit there's almost this instinctive reaction in a person to be like, oh, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it. I think my very next live tweet was like, actually, no, that's still pretty bad. Because, I mean, I'm of the opinion that if it passes the Turing test, you may as well consider it.
Yeah, sure.
As sentient. So, and I mean, that's something, because we see our protagonist have opinions on both sides of this throughout the chapter. Like, as she's walking through, there's very much a sense of at the start, it's like, oh, they're fake. And I think that's something she's trying to convince herself. And then the more she interacts with them, the more she starts to think, this is pretty fucked up.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I don't know. I guess there's no good answer to this. I
mean, just as a little aside, I find this argument and the sides we're taking on a little bit ironic, considering you're the vegetarian and I'm not.
Well, if it's an animal, animals I know have emotions, right? Like, fucking robots don't have emotions; they're just robots.
You just got some sort of you got to check your, I don't know, birth privilege.
Sure.
You're against things. You're against things that weren't birthed.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's move on here. Scarf Girl kind of speaks with the Mouseketeers and does something interesting that I didn't expect, which is basically the first thing she does is try and explain to them what they actually are, that they're not actually, real people. And that's in text, Elliot. They're not real people. They're shadows of their former selves. They don't have any of the kind of realness of the originals, and they're doomed to expire soon. Which does that remind you of anyone there, Elliot?
Yeah, Blake. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, well, sure. Every point of view character in this damn story with an expiry date. Yeah.
No, it's interesting that she decides to tell them all this, because I guess it's the whole she's trading for information, but. She could have picked less destructive information.
Yeah, because it does kind of mess with them, as of course it should, right?
Yeah.
And it's this is actually one of the points that we're not going to reopen this again, but the fact that their reactions to this are kind of understated because they are kind of vestiges. Like, I feel like they're kind of staying more in their role here of being the scared children and not kind of stepping outside of that to kind of start a Dolores-esque revolution or anything like that.
I mean, that has more to do with the spirits in them than vestigism,
well,
I think.
That's fair. Because, this is a horrifying / cool thing. These vestiges have kind of withered enough that there are spirits inhabiting, spirits of mice mostly, but the spirit of a pregnant dog in one of them. And it
which is like, does that mean do spirits get pregnant like that rate, or is it just the spirit of a pregnant dog?
Yeah,
like, it raises so many questions, and I'm so glad that our protagonist was smart enough to be like, I don't want to know the answers to those because I think neither do I. It's creepy.
No. Here's what it is. So there's obviously like human spirits of fertility, right? And this is just like the dog. You know, dogs have their own versions of the spirits, and this is the dog spirit of fertility. And that's it. It's fine. It's not creepy at all.
I mean, I think, just going back to most imagery of fertility gods I can think of, it's usually just giant penises, but okay. I guess pregnancy works too.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, so I like the idea of these animal spirits kind of inhabiting the broken bits of these vestiges. And one of the main reasons I like it, actually, is we've kind of had this idea of, Blake is damaged, maybe he's got a spirit in him back in whatever, arc 5, 6? And we kind of touched on the same thing for Scarf Girl here, like a chapter or two ago. And it's nice to actually see what that tangibly looks like. Like, what does it look like to be broken and have some spirits inhabiting you? Oh, it looks like this. It means that you have, fucking mouse spirits for teeth or whatever.
Yeah. Man, I loved that bit.
You're a monster, Elliot, if you love that bit.
It was horrifying. I loved every second of it. No, I agree. I love this idea that the sight manifests itself differently for every person, because it means every POV character can offer us a new sort of model. Like, I really like this simple model ex-Maggie's sight presented with her for this, which is the people had chunks missing out of them, and there were mice, pregnant dogs, whatever, filling in those gaps. It's such a, it's obviously a very simple model for illustrating that they're possessed by these spirits. It was awesome and gross, and I loved it.
Yep, classic descriptor of Wild Boar's works. So Scarf Girl kind of keeps talking to them, and as she kind of explains her situation to them, Johannes arrives, being like, "Oh, so that's what happened to you? Interesting." Basically Johannes offers her his help in exchange for her being a kind of lieutenant of his, and it's a good deal. It's another good deal.
Yeah, no, she's getting a lot more of those than Blake ever did.
Yeah, totally. Who knew you just have to not be associated with the Diabolist and everyone will just kind of hand you good shit. So it's so two things I want to talk about here. One is Maggie is really ex-Maggie. Ex-Maggie is really kind of the belle of the ball here, right? Being wooed by a bunch of different groups. And that's kind of been happening throughout this entire chapter. First with the Young Justice crew of Young Behames and Duchamps, then kind of Sandra, even possibly Andy might have been doing some of that, and now Johannes clearly is. I
mean, regardless of Andy's motives, I mean, the fact is the whole situation went very well for her, all things considered. Yeah. I agree. She's definitely picked the right time and place to be in trouble, apparently, because everyone is scrounging around for every potential advantage they can get. Even though she clearly isn't like a powerhouse, right? But it's a great offer. Johannes says he can get her name back, and she'd be guaranteed a seat at the table when he kind of ascends to power, which seems fairly likely based on how powerful he seems to be. I mean, he's definitely in with a good shot from the seams of it. And also, he seems pretty chill. Like, he seems like he's being pretty good about this whole thing, putting aside the Mouseketeers, depending on your read of that, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, he seems pretty chill, except for the horror amusement park that he runs in his house.
In his basement, more or less.
So, I mean, obviously, I think the interesting thing here is that Johannes thinks he has enough sway to get her name back from Pado. I think I've said multiple times that I expect her not to get her name back, but to have to try and pick a new one, or take Molly's. But it's interesting because, like, you know, obviously we had Sandra sort of say that regardless of what it is or whatever, like with the fairy, just it's not worth it. You know, it's never worth it. And there was a thing in her speech that to me drew connections to the satyr she saved in her interlude and implied that they went back to the fairy, which really puts that in perspective, because that was very much a time where she was coming into that confrontation from a place of power, and it still seems like in the end it was just not at all worth it.
Yeah.
So I'm more inclined to believe Sandra was correct in that when she said Johannes is maybe overconfident, like he might be strong enough that they're willing to make this deal with him, but it will be part of some fucking game shit that, you know, comes back to bite him in the ass. And if, you know, she becomes Maggie again and is tied to him, then something getting him in the ass would presumably not be great for her either.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I don't know. I do think that taking this offer at face value, assuming that there's no tricks, which obviously isn't a fair assumption, but just looking at it at face value for now, it's a good deal. It's a great deal. Maggie's been offered a lot of great deals this entire arc.
Well, so that's sort of where I wanted to go with this, because I agree that at face value, it's the smart thing to do. But when she was Maggie, she got that deal from the Young Justice, and we talked about how she was at odds between the right thing to do and the smart thing to do, and she chose the smart thing, and it didn't work out very well for her.
But that wasn't because of that. That was because she did the dumb thing and trusted Audrey.
I mean, yes, but he did try to convince her to go.
Sure.
Before, like, that was sort of, this was, him taking her name was the sort of, she's not going to do it, like, you know, I'll take this into my own hands. But the first thing he did was try to just convince her to go. So, like, you know, this isn't sort of fair or anything, but you can make the argument that because she chose that thing that...
Sure, and I think Podrick would make that argument.
Yes, he definitely would. Anyway, the point is, like, you know, you can sort of say that making the smart choice is what opened her up to somebody taking advantage of her, and I don't think any of us, including our point of view character, is stupid enough to believe that she will not have to cross a lot of moral lines in servitude to Johannes.
Well,
so she's very much... Yeah, like, there's no way that this will be a job where she always gets to do good things.
Yeah.
So this is another opportunity for her to pick between the right and the smart thing, and we very much get the impression at the end of the chapter that she's gone with the smart, in air quotes, decision. But I think... I'm actually hoping, I'm putting all my chips down on it's a fake out, and she's going to turn the offer down eventually. Maybe not at first, but I think...
Should I put this in the sheet?
Yeah, okay. Yes, I'll commit.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think she's going to flip, and maybe she'll do it first, but she's going to flip and do the right thing, not the smart thing. And I hope that the message of this interlude is that in the end, that kind of works out.
All right. I've written down, ex-Maggie won't take Johannes' deal. Lock it in.
Yeah. Or, yeah, you're right. Because if she takes it, she can't get out. That's the whole practitioner deal.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. Presumably next chapter.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of room for this one to come out, I don't think, unless it's going to leave it on a cliffhanger and wait for whoever Arc 9's POV is to catch up.
No, you have to wait for whoever Arc 9's POV is, and then a few arcs for them to get to the Erasure team and have a crack at it, and then they lose, and then we jump back to ex-Maggie again.
Yeah, after they're finished catching Pose again in Arc 12.
Yeah. So ex-Maggie promises to consider his offer, but seems pretty keen. And in the meantime, kind of takes some no strings attached help from him. One of the things she does is borrows a phone from him. At first, he kind of drawn to life's a phone for her, but then she needs a real one. So she borrows his phone and uses it to call her mum, speaking with her until the battery runs out, just about miscellaneous catch-up things.
Yeah. And so before we get to the phone call, because that's obviously a whole thing, how crazy is the bit where she's like, I need to be gone by 3:30 or something, and Johannes is like, oh, well, what time would you like it to be when you leave? And she's just sort of like, oh, you know, like ideally 3:30. Whereas, like, in my mind, I was going, oh my god, this is terrifying. Like, how? And then it turns out she's been there for a day, and it's just like that's sort of I think a lot of what seems to get to me the most in this book is stuff fucking with your perception and like your inner brain. Like, the thing that freaked me out the most a few chapters ago was when our POV character felt no connection to the name Maggie Holt anymore.
Yeah.
Like that stuff really gets to me. The concept that you just lose track of time because of this place just freaks me out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't freak her out enough as far as I'm concerned.
I think the whole seeming time manipulation thing here, again, is just another beat of like, yeah, Johannes is actually like really powerful. He can actually basically just do whatever the fuck he wants in this huge area of town.
Because we sort of knew practitioners were essentially gods in their domain, essentially. And you forget that he has this huge fucking area where he's essentially a god, and it's like, honestly, it'd be weird if he didn't have a bit of a god complex at that point.
Yeah, I feel that. How could you not if basically half of this town was could literally bend to your will?
Yeah, exactly. I think it would be hard for someone to keep that in perspective.
Yeah.
Especially if you spend a lot of time there.
Yeah. So this call with her mum begins like this. Maggie says, "Mum, it's me." Her mum responds, and Maggie says, "Me, just me." It's just such a nice, it's a great way to end the chapter, right? It's a very nice and wholesome conversation, but there is this like undercurrent through it of feeling like Maggie is kind of running out of steam. Sorry, Scarf Girl is running out of steam, right? It makes me nervous because it gives me this feeling of like not giving up, but just kind of like, I don't know, setting her affairs in order before she dies.
Yeah, there's a real sense of this being a farewell.
Yeah.
There's a sense of resignation. I think this is her. You're right. Like just sort of cleaning things out before she moves on. And, I think the implication that we're definitely meant to feel is it's because she is planning on saying yes to Johannes, and so it's sort of like, this is her saying goodbye to her mum.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, I mean, if she gets her name back, she can call her mum again. Why not?
Well, yeah, but she'll be in service to Johannes, and it's like, I don't think she'll have much time for social shilling. Is the assumption I would be working off of if I was planning on taking this deal.
Sure. No, you're right. It does feel like a farewell in a weird way that kind of makes me nervous. Maybe it is. I kind of get a bit of that vibe of like she's saying goodbye because once she's in service to Johannes, that's kind of it for a sense. But it feels like it doesn't quite feel like that to me because it doesn't feel like it's a hey, I'll still be around, but I won't be able to talk to you much. It does. I don't know. I guess that's a subtle distinction.
No, but you're right. Maybe that was part of what was feeding me. Like I as I was saying, I had this idea that she's planning on not taking the deal, and that angle would certainly line up more with that thinking.
Anyway, that's how our 8.6 ends. Now, before we end our episode, we wanted to talk about some comments from 5 years ago when this episode first came out, when this chapter first came out, to see what people were saying at the time. I'm going to start off with mine because I think it's going to reinvigorate this argument a little bit. Because this is a thread by a bunch of people, but it was started by Great Wormgold. Basically saying that, or this wasn't, I don't think what Great Wormgold said, but what kind of a few other people put together to form this conclusion, that Johannes is kind of providing a service to these others, right? He is allowing them to hunt vestiges instead of hunting people, right? And so he's kind of doing a great service to the community by taking others who might be hunting actual people and instead having them hunt having them hunt vestiges, right? And sure, it's, these children and presumably the other vestiges had to kind of give up their shadows, which kind of, there was an analogy given to kind of donating blood there. So they have to kind of unwittingly suffer a bit of a pep hit there, but that's better than if they were hunted down by dangerous others.
Actual others.
Yeah. So Johannes did nothing wrong.
Okay, I mean, obviously I think to engage in a discussion on this at all, we obviously have to leave behind the idea that the vestiges are just as emotionally important as the real people. Like, so yeah. I will leave that opinion aside for the sake of this argument, but obviously that is still my opinion, so okay. I think this is invalid from its core.
With that assumption, you're right, it is invalid.
But, okay, so assuming that the vestiges don't matter, I mean, this is interesting. I could see that argument, but again, that's sort of like saying, well, if you have this example is probably a bit too real. If you have online message boards just for Nazis and stuff, and it's like, oh, well, it keeps all their Nazi talk in there. It's like, yeah, but it also kind of encourages it and, helps them network with each other and shit.
Okay, we are again. What is it with us getting too political lately, Elliot? But no, I hear that, but my counter to that would be that I don't think humans, are inherently predisposed to be Nazis. Radical idea, I know, but bear with me. Whereas I do think others are, I don't think it's unfair to others to say that mostly a lot of types of others that we see are predisposed towards, violently mutilating humans.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's very fair. I think it's interesting because I guess the kid who grew up watching Stargate in me just thinks the solution is, well, you just kill all of the others that are like that, Stargate very much took the opinion that if you essentially commit genocide, but it's on a race that preys on humans, then it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Which is something I didn't appreciate the moral ambiguity of until I was much older.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I guess that's fair. If we're talking about creatures that you don't just think should be wiped out, and I guess do have a natural desire to fuck with people like this, then I guess arguably. Yeah,
I've kind of flipped myself around on it now because I'm thinking about Evan, and he is like an other, right? Capital O other. And yes, he's not like a goblin or a fairy or a demon. He's a ghost, which really are the most, have the most capacity for kind of being docile of all the others that we've seen, I suppose. But the fact that he is so clearly like a force for good makes me think that maybe we are just playing into a practitioner propaganda here by assuming that all others are inherently evil.
Yeah, I mean, and it falls back to that thing, like how much do you indulge a broken system? Like, as much of these others are maybe natural or something, if they're part of a shit system, you gotta reevaluate that. Like, does a incarnation of conquest have to be torturing and kidnapping and stuff people, or is there other ways for such an incarnation to exist? Is sort of some questions you got to evaluate before you can just either write them off or say that, there's nothing to be done.
Maybe there's like a safe, consensual way for an incarnation of conquest to get its rocks off that doesn't involve, torture.
I mean, maybe. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there's hopefully something. Yeah.
Anyway, leave us your comments on who's right.
Well, I guess my comment that I brought from 5 years ago is much shorter as an idea, but I pulled a comment from some guy, and some guy compares Johannes's whole shtick in this chapter to like the Pied Piper story.
Yeah.
Which I just like. I thought that was a neat little connection. I don't think I'm going to put too much weight in it as like some symbolic thing that was intentional, but just the fact that there are kids running around with mice in them in this chapter, and Johannes literally recruits a kid in Ex Maggie here. Like there's some interesting comparisons to be made.
He has a set of pipes. I think it is intentional. Isn't his implement like a set of pipes?
Oh, it was a brass pipe. No, you're right. It was some pipes that he was banging against a ring, right? I don't know which one's his implement, but
yeah, maybe it's not his implement. Maybe it's just a tool that he has. I feel like taking the thread of Ex Maggie's story here being pretty fairy tale-esque throughout the past few chapters, I feel like it's intentional to have Johannes be a Pied Piper.
Yeah, I actually forgot about the pipes that he was carrying. You're right. It's actually like a much better connection than I was even giving it credit for. Anyway, it's definitely fun, regardless of whether it has additional meaning or not. Yeah. It's fun.
I love it. I wonder if that means good or bad things for his character. Probably bad. I mean, the Pied Piper was like the villain of that story.
I mean, arguably the mayor who refused to pay him.
Yeah, you're right. He was just an entrepreneurial kind of guy.
Well, no, actually, no. You know what? I take that back because, like, an appropriate response to not being paid is not to kidnap and
they
probably
were collateral.
Hundreds of
they
kids.
were collateral. It was in the contract. You should have read the contract. They were the collateral. Everyone knows that.
That's such a practitioner line of reasoning.
If you don't pay me, I get to take your children. It's common collateral. Like, it's Rumpelstiltskin. It's the Rumpelstiltskin clause, they call it. Anyway. I do like the connection. I think it kind of richens the world having these analogs that kind of run parallel to the story.
Yeah. But that's us for this episode.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody. Remember, we will be talking about the discussion question, which is, who do you think should be the Lord of Jacob's Bell? In episode 9.1 in about 4 or 5 days. So make sure you leave your answers to that in the discussion thread, which will be linked down in the comments down below.
And in fact, you should definitely get it into this one because we've got a bonus chapter this week. Our recording schedule's pretty crammed. And if you throw it in 8.7's one in a couple of days, chances are we won't really have time to see it
unless you're really quick.
Yeah. So, if you've got an answer that you really want to give us, make sure to chuck it in by 8.6s. And, by the date. I mean, you can't put it in 8.6s in 3 weeks from now and then claim that we didn't read it out. That doesn't make sense.
It's only your own fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, so leave it there. Now, Elliot, you mentioned your live reads earlier in this episode. What are those? Where can I find those?
They're available. They're available on the Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @MediaMDPodcast. And, we do all sorts of stuff there, but at the moment, by the numbers, it's probably mostly the live reads, just because a live read consists of many tweets.
Yeah. That's also a great way to interact with us if you want to send us cool memes that you saw on Twitter or, tweet at us pictures of the McElroys or whatever. That's the place to do it. If you want to find out more about the Duff Media Network, the best place to go for that is duffmedia.com. Has info on all the other shows on the Duff Media Network and a calendar, so you can find out just when is that next episode of Vouterview coming out.
Mm-hmm. And, once you've found out more about Doof Media, if you want to contribute more to Doof Media, head over to patreon.com/doofmedia. There's a link on doofmedia.com to the patreon.com/doofmedia.
You've said it so much, it's losing all meaning.
Anyway, patreon.com/doofmedia is where you can find all the info on the great perks you get for becoming a patron.
Now, the phrase Doof Media may have lost all meaning because you've said it so much, but it will never lose all meaning for me, Elliot. That's the feeling of happiness that I get from knowing that I'm able to support the works of Wildbow. That feeling will never lose its meaning because it keeps me going. And if you want to embrace that warm, fuzzy feeling as well, the best way to achieve it is to go to www.patreon.com/Wildbow and support Wildbow because he makes all these great, cool stories.
Exactly. It doesn't just keep you going, that warm, fuzzy feeling. It also keeps Wildbow going because it gives him money. Anyway, so apart from all that, we'll see you all on Wednesday, the 24th of July, as we discuss the final Maggie interlude chapter. No, it isn't a Maggie interlude, is it? Because she hasn't had that name for 3/4 of it.
Who knows whose interlude it is?
Scarf Girl's interlude arc, final chapter, Wednesday, 24th of July. I think I've already said this bit. Goodbye.
Bye.